Hey YouTubers, welcome to my channel. Today I'm gonna walk you through how to install Klipper. I'm gonna be a little bit more detailed and go through maybe some troubleshooting. Now the reason for this video today is because I'm noticing on the Facebook group of Klipper firmware, there's a lot of people that are asking easy questions that are easily answered by the document, right? So if you read a document and you get as far as to install the firmware, you shouldn't be asking really easy questions. For example, like PDI tune, you know, how to do a bed level, you know, those type of things. Like those are all documented in the document. So I'm not gonna call people being lazy, but it kind of comes off that way when you guys ask really simple questions that can be answered by the document itself. The documentation is well laid out. And if you can't even find certain things, if you Google search, I'm pretty sure like answers will pop up to fix the issues. So it's very important to read, guys. Very important to read the documentation instead of just asking little simple questions. Now, there's nothing wrong with asking questions, but when it's that easy, when the answer is right in front of you in the document, it just makes it seems as if you're just wanting the answer, not want to look, work to look for it. So it's more rewarding to work and figure out something on your own than to just ask the question and just get the answer, right? It's just, to me, it's just not, it's almost like you're not learning it. But like I said, I'm not here to bash or accuse anyone. It's just stuff I'm noticing. So, for example, I taught myself Klipper. I taught myself Marlin. I didn't ask for help. I looked around the web. I got an idea. And then after studying it, I was able to compile Marlin after 3 months after owning my first printer, which was an Ender 3 Pro. That yellow one that you see back there, that was the first printer I bought. Of course, it's overly modded now. And then 6 months later, I tried to install Klipper once I find out that it's an awesome firmware compared to Marlin, and I failed 3 times. 3 times I failed to install Klipper because I just didn't understand it. It was totally different from Marlin, right? I kept on going back to Marlin because Marlin was just so easy to install and repetitive, but I've maxed out Marlin. Like literally, if I try to print fast on Marlin firmware, I would get mad ringing. You'd have to do other things that are not as intuitive as Klipper in order to get rid of the ringings. And then your max acceleration in Marlin is much lower than Klipper. So I was determined to install a Klipper. Like I was really determined because I've seen people having these massive high accelerations and then the prints will come out really, really good. So I'm like, man, I really wanted that. And after the 4th attempt, I finally figured it out. I finally figured out how the config work, how the stuff works, and again, it's all in the documentation, and that's how I figured it out. So this tutorial is for the beginners. It's for people who may already know Klipper somewhat and just want more details on it. And again, this is from my perspective. I'm not an engineer. I'm not like, I didn't make Klipper. More detailed questions will come from an engineer, that someone that made Klipper. This is from just a user experience. This is just from me figuring out on my own and finding the best way to explain how to install it and how to troubleshoot. So, all right, guys. So let's get into that. So you want to visit this website here. Today I'm gonna use Mainsail instead of Fluid. Now Fluid and Mainsail are the same thing. They're just a web interface that connects with Klipper, so that way you can control your printer using Klipper, right? So it's just a web interface, just like Octoprint, similar to Octoprint. But this is specifically designed with Klipper in mind, right? So everything that you see, it's all based around Klipper. It's almost like BreadWrap kind of firmware-ish, where you can control the printer from a web interface. Same concept, nothing's really too different. So you want to go ahead, you want to visit this site. So as you can see, GitHub, Raymond H2 Mainsail OS. That's where you want to go. If you go to the regular Mainsail site, that's for that installation is specifically for Linux. So if you want to install this on Linux, that's where you would go for that. But in this case, you want to visit this particular website here to get the Raspberry Pi OS. Okay, so you're gonna click here, and as you can see, it's 1 gigabyte. And it says Mainsail OS R Pi Lite. So we're gonna go ahead and download this, and make sure you have I'm gonna use a 32 gigabyte. Not sure if you can see that because I'm using a webcam, so it might not be the greatest, but this is a 32 gigabyte micro SD card. You can use an 8 gigabyte, 60 gigabyte, but I would say 8 gigabyte as the minimum to use for this. And so while it's installing, some benefits of Klipper. Klipper has better kinematics. You can print even before tuning. You can print with it, and your print will come out like noticeably, significantly better than Marlin. Not that Marlin is terrible. Marlin is good when you're printing slow. So your typical 30 millimeters to 60 millimeters, maybe to pushing it, maybe 70 millimeters a second for Marlin. And outside of that, you will start seeing a lot of problems trying to push Marlin. But when it comes to Klipper, man, you can instantly install this without any tuning and already do 100 millimeters with at least minimum of like maybe 2,000 acceleration, maybe 3,000 before you need any tuning. So that's far superior than what you would get with Marlin. All right, so now that it's done, all right, we're gonna go ahead and I'm going to go, as you can see, I have it right here. I'm gonna just drag it down to my download folder so you guys can see. So I'm just gonna take it. You can extract it, but I'm just gonna take it and drag it to my download folder here. So let me see, that is going here. So it is transferring. And okay, that should be in my download folder now. So let's get this over here. I'm working with 2 screens, guys. All right, so that's my download folder. So I can just so here's the OS. So I'm just gonna get rid of this. Right, so next thing you want to do, now that you download it, make sure you plug your SD card in. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug mine in. Okay, so this is my SD card. As you can see, I have a previous copy. Let me go back there real quick, guys, because it ended up closing out. As you can see here, I already have a previous copy of it, so I'm just basically redoing it for the purpose of kind of demonstrating how to install it. So I'm just going to go ahead and launch the Raspberry Pi imager. So what you want to do is download this here. It's called a Raspberry Pi imager. You can get this easily. Just go on Google, type in Raspberry Pi imager, and it will take you to the website. You download it. So we're gonna go ahead and choose our OS. So we're gonna choose from computer, and you just, mine is already there, of course. It already knew from previous installation where to be. But if you didn't know where to go, if you want it, in detail, if I come on here, it's basically asking you where is the download folder, right? Where is the imagery? So you click on your downloads, come here, depending on where you put it, and it's right here, right? So depends on where you put it is where you will navigate to find your OS. Now, you select your SD card, which is already there. It already picked up my SD card. I'm gonna hit right, and it's gonna ask if you want all the existing data will be erased. It asks if you want to continue, of course, continue. Now, there's two ways to get your Pi online, right? One way is to type. It will ask you if you want to go wireless, to type your router information in so it can connect wirelessly to your network, or you can plug it directly in with an Ethernet cable. So there's two ways to connect your Pi to the internet. In this case, we're gonna do it wirelessly. So I might just add my information. Don't want to show that out. So it's gonna go ahead and it's going to image right now. So we're gonna let that image, and we'll come right back. All right, guys. So as you can see, it was verifying, and now it's finally done. So what we're gonna do is hit continue. So we go ahead and hit continue. So now our SD card is done. So I'm gonna go ahead and open it. Go here. Okay, so it ejected. So we're gonna go ahead and reinsert it so you can see. We gotta go to, there we go. So once you reinsert it, because it will automatically eject once it install and verify the installation files, it's going to automatically eject your SD card. Go ahead and just pop it right back in. And then you want to go to the root of your SD card and look for where it says this here, Mainsail OS WAP supplicant. Alright guys, so once you find this and you open this up, okay, you're going to scroll down where you see it says WPA2. Now I'm gonna blur this area out, but what you want to do is put your network SSID right here, and then your password, your network password, since you're going to be connecting this wirelessly. And then once that's done, you want to remove all the hashtags that's going to be here. Okay, so there's going to be some hashtags, but since I already did this, there's going to be some hashtags here, and if you don't remove it, then you won't be able to connect to your network, your Wi-Fi, your network. So make sure you remove those hashtags. Now you want to come down further, right? And then it's United Kingdom usually will be already selected here. Leave that if you live in Europe, United Kingdom, that area. But if you live in the US, you want to hashtag out the United Kingdom and remove the hashtag from United States. That way you can connect properly to your wireless infrastructure. And once that's done, then we're going to move on, eject, and move on to the next process. Alright guys, so once you have put the information in to your WPA supplicant text file, you're going to save, and we're going to go ahead and eject. So we're going to close this information out. Go ahead and eject it. It allows me to. Currently use save a. Okay, sure. You go ahead and try that again. Sure, continue. All right, it's ejected. So now I'm going to go ahead and take my SD card out and plug it into my Raspberry Pi. Okay, so let me do that real quick. Alright, so it's plugged in. Just make sure you turn on your Raspberry Pi once you plug it in. Also, once you plug it in, make sure that your Raspberry Pi is turned on after you plug in the SD card, and make sure your printer is plugged into a USB on the Raspberry Pi. It's very important that you do that, okay? Because we're gonna have to get the serial to plug into the config so Klipper can talk to the board. If you don't do that, then that's where you run into some problem. So again, plug in your SD card, plug your printer in via USB if you're using the USB. There's other ways to plug it in, but for now, I'm assuming most of you guys are just gonna plug it in with a USB. So plug it in, USB, turn on your Raspberry Pi. And so the next thing we're gonna do is to see if it hits the network. Now, in my case, I've already have my Raspberry Pi tied to a specific IP address on my router. Okay, so it's linked to that IP address and it won't lose it. So anytime I reinstall, doesn't matter what, it's tied to that MAC address and I'll always get that IP address. Okay, so if I come back here and close this out and open up this, as you can see, I have a bunch of printer already installed. So what we're looking for is my switch wire. So this should be it. Alright, as you can see guys, it's connected. And this is wirelessly connected, so that's my IP address for my switch wire. Alright, so before we connect, I'm just gonna go ahead and start updating all of this. So I'm gonna update this. So I'm gonna run all the updates before I go ahead and continue with the installation. So let me go ahead, run all this update, and then we'll pick up from there. All right, see you guys. All right, guys. So my system is all updated, and that's one of the benefit running with Mainsail or Klipper. It's easy to update the information. So as you can see, you can update Klipper, Moonraker, Mainsail itself, and the system. Okay, so this is your Raspberry Pi OS system itself. This is Mainsail itself, the actual Mainsail. Because remember, this is built on a Linux, kind of Linux version. So this is your Linux OS package. Then this is your Mainsail package, and then this is Moonraker. That's also what brings this to life. It's a API, and then you have Klipper, right? So it's all baked in. You all can update from right here, and it just makes it pretty easy to use. So now the next move to do before we even add or config, you need to install Putty. Now if you're on a Windows, you install Putties. Now if you're doing it from a Mac, I'm not sure what the equivalent on a Mac would be, because I've never done this from a Mac. I might have to look into that one. But for those who are on Windows, if you have a Windows device, you want to install Putty. So Putty is just an SSH client. It's for you to SSH into the Raspberry Pi OS, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looked like. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to launch Putty. So this is Putty. And I'm going to go ahead, because like I said, I have some stuff pre-set up here. But it's just to make you guys' life easier by showing you guys exactly what I'm doing. Alright, so we launch Putty. Make sure you install Putty. You put your IP address for the IP address for the Pi. So we're gonna log into it. In this case, it's the yellow it's the switch wire. If I can find it down here, gonna hit load. So this have all the old IP address. So let me go ahead and log in with a new one, which will be 0.30. So I'm gonna open. Yes. Now, once you open it, you get a right now you just couldn't see it on the screen because I'm using two screens, so I have to be shifting stuff to the screen that you're seeing. You'll get a dialog box saying if it's your first time connecting or whatever, just hit yes. Now, for your Pi, the username is Pi, literally just Pi, okay? The password is Raspberry. Okay, so now that we install, we're gonna change directory to Klipper. So So we're going to just go cd Klipper. Alright, so now we're in Klipper's directory. Now we gotta make the config for a particular board. Because if we don't flash it, if we don't make the firmware to flash for this particular board, the Klipper and your board, which is known as an MCU, won't be able to connect and talk to each other, okay? Because again, I'm gonna break it down. Klipper is basically using the Raspberry Pi to do all the calculation, all the heavy geometry calculation, all of the, you know, for example, if you're running a Core XY, it's calculating the motor movements in terms of the direction. You know, when both motor got to work together, when only one motor needs to work together. It's taking all that calculation that your board will do if you are running Marlin, because in Marlin your board does all that calculation. But with Klipper, your Raspberry Pi takes all that heavy calculation, okay? And when it takes that heavy calculation, it sends a simple, it just sends a G code to the board. Literally, all your board do is just process G code. It just takes the G code, send it directly to the motors, and the motors just move. That's literally it. It don't longer have to do the calculation and then send to the motors. So you're basically breaking the work down in half. So with that being said, this is why with Klipper you can send a lot of step rates to the board, because the board don't have to calculate the movement of the printer anymore. It just sends the step rates, okay? Sends the G code to the motor, and that allows you to have these high acceleration ceilings. Whereas Marlin is all running on one board. Same thing with RepRap, it's running on the board itself. Well, but hence why RepRap boards tend to be expensive, because they're more beefy for that. But if you're running on an SKR, your standard board, even though they're 32-bit, their processor is still not as beefy as a Raspberry Pi processor. So in that case, you're limited on step rates. You're limited on how fast you can push the machine, because you're running everything on that board. But again, with Klipper, because it's running on the Pi, it takes all the heavy calculation, uses the Pi processor, which is superior to the board, calculates everything, send it to the board, and the board just moves. That's literally, the board just issue commands to the motors, and that's it. So I'm just breaking it down so you understand what's the correlation there. So what we got to do now, we got to create the firmware for our board specifically. So we got to type in make menu config. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna enable extra lower level configuration option. So this is where you will pick all the configuration for your particular board. In this case, my board is the SKR 1.4 Turbo, so I'm just gonna go ahead and select the 1.4. So it's using the LPC176X processor. So we're going to use that, and this particular processor we're using is the LPC1768. Well, my bad, actually 1769, which is 120 megahertz. The 1768 is for the 1.4, but for the turbo, it's using a 20 extra megahertz faster. It's the LPC1769. Target board uses SmoothieWare bootloader. Yes, it does. And we're going to use USB as the primary communication. So once we select that, that's all we got to select for this particular board. If you're using an E3 Mini, there's more other options that you got to take for the E3 Mini. So for example, if you're using an E3 Mini, SKR E3 Mini 1.2 or one of those, you have to put the GPIO pins. And to find that, if you go into the sample configs, so if you go to look at one of the sample configuration for the actual board, it will tell you what the GPIO specific pin for that board to use. So you can plug that in, and that's how you'll get that information. Like I said, if you read the documents, everything is there. But in this case, we don't need that for the SKR 1.4 or 1.4 Turbo or 1.3. I don't think you need that for that type of board. So, alright, so we're going to hit escape, hit yes, and then type make. And it's building the firmware. Alright guys, now that the firmware has been made, we got to go and log into the Raspberry Pi, the core of the Raspberry Pi, and find the firmware and put it on an SD card. Okay, so get a spare SD card if you can. Let me see if I have a spare. Doesn't have to be big. It could be one of those you know, those small SKR SD card, like 128 megabytes. You don't need a big one for this. So let me see. Yep, I got a small one right here. So now we're gonna put the firmware on this and flash the board. So go ahead and plug this in. See if that works. Alright, now to see the Raspberry Pi folder, you need another software, and this is called winscp. winscp. That's WINSCP. So this is you install it, and let me show you what it looked like. So as you can see, winscp. Download and install it, and once you install it, you have access to see all your Raspberry Pi folders. Okay, so we're gonna go and make a few adjustments here, because as you can see, I haven't edited for the new IP address. The reason why the IP address looks so different from the current one up here is because I've changed my router. So instead of my router giving a 1, it's giving a 0. Okay, so let me go ahead and change it. So the yellow, let me change this to, we edit it, 0 to 30, and we're gonna hit save on that, and we're gonna go ahead and change this as well, so I'm not confused. Alright, there we go. So now the password to log in, same password as we did with Putty. It's Pi and Raspberry. Okay, now that we log in, we're gonna go to look like I'm already there, but to show you, if you guys log in and go to home, okay, so if you first log in, you go to home, you go to Klipper, then you go to out, and then there's the bin file. Now we're gonna drag this to our SD card and rename it firmware.bin, because if you drag this to the SD card the way it is, it won't flash. Okay, so it needs to say firmware.bin. All right, so we're gonna go ahead, get our SD card pull up here, which is right here. Another thing I want to teach you guys as well, when you flash, when you plug in, when you rename it firmware.bin and you flash your board, you will know if it's flashed or not, because when you try to connect, if it don't connect no matter what you did, or you can't see the serial, then it's not flashed. So the best way to troubleshoot this is to take back the SD card out, plug it in your computer, and see if it says this right here, firmware.cur occur. If it doesn't say that, that means it didn't flash, it didn't take. Okay, so in that case, you just delete it out, re-drag back the Klipper.bin, rename it to firmware.bin, eject it, push it back in your printer, let it flash, and try again. Okay, so that's where a lot of people run into the issue. If it doesn't say firmware.cur, it didn't flash, it didn't take at all. So go ahead and delete this. We're gonna drag the Klipper.bin. We're gonna rename it firmware.bin, just like that, and then we eject. Okay, go ahead, eject this out, and it's ejected. So I'm gonna plug it out. Now I'm gonna plug it into my computer on my printer. There we go. I'm gonna turn on my printer. All right. Now, once that's done, we're no longer gonna keep this up. I mean, you can keep it up, but I no longer gonna keep it up because I know it's gonna work. But you can keep it up. You don't have to. All right. But we'll keep this up because there's an information we got to grab. Okay. So the next thing we're gonna do is try to get the USB serial to plug into the configuration. So I'm gonna show you my configuration. I already have it. So this is my configuration. I downloaded it earlier before I, of course, wipe my Raspberry Pi to do this tutorial. So this is my config. I'll show you guys here. So this is my config. This is my serial. So this is the serial connection for the MCU, for the board. Okay, this is how Klipper talks to the board and can communicate. If you don't have this in your config, it will not communicate at all. It doesn't matter what you do, it won't work at all. Okay. Now, another mistake. So I'm going to tell you guys right now. I know mine is not going to connect, and for the main and the biggest reason why it won't connect is this right here. See, this is for when you're trying to do the input shaper with an accelerometer. Okay, if this is plugged in, it's not going to work, because the reason why it's not going to work is that I don't have all the software installed for the accelerometer to work, and it's going to try to connect to both of this at the same time, and it's going to fail to connect. Okay, so I have to wipe this out of my config in order for it to connect now, because like I said, I don't have all the software installed for it to connect to this virtual Pi that it's trying to connect to. So I got to wipe this out. And then once I install the software to do the input shaper for the accelerometer, then I can put that back in and everything will be fine. But for now, I have to wipe it out as it won't connect. So maybe if I send you my config exactly how it was, and I send you that, you probably have a hard time trying to connect, because that was plugged in and you don't have that software in your Raspberry Pi installed. So it won't communicate. So that's the reason. So again, I just wanted to clarify that if that's installed and anybody else's config that you might want to grab and kind of connect to yours, look out for that, because if that's there, you won't be able to connect. All right, so this is my config. I already have my serial, as you can see. So if I upload it right now, I connect right away. But for an example, I want to show you guys how to get that serial. So what you would do, let me lower this. I don't know the command out of my head, so I'm going to go Klipper website here. And I'm going to grab the command. I'll show you guys what the command looks like. You want to copy this right here. As you can see, it says it is necessary to determine the serial port connected to the microcontroller. Okay, for microcontrollers that connect via USB, run this command. This is how you get the serial port. Okay, so you got to copy this. Then you go back to Putty. All right, and then you paste it right here. Okay, then we're going to hit enter. And as you can see, my serial popped up. Now, if you don't see this pop up at all, if you try to do this and you do not see this pop up at all, that means one of a couple of things. One, you didn't plug in the printer into your Raspberry Pi. Two, your firmware didn't flash at all. That means if it doesn't flash, it won't know what to do. So your firmware didn't flash. Okay, so it's one of those two things. Either you didn't plug in your USB connection into a Raspberry Pi, your printer is not on from flashing it, or your firmware didn't take. So you need to troubleshoot that if you don't see the serial. But once you do everything I just showed you to do it right, you'll see the serial pop up on in Putty. And all you got to do is copy this. So I'm gonna just go ahead and copy it again as an example. You copy this. Once you highlight it, it's already automatically copies. And then you take your config. I'll show you to you. Take your config. As an example, I'm just gonna erase this, even though I know it's right. And then you paste it here. Okay. Let me delete this and save, because I guess I didn't save it. You paste it there. I'm gonna hit save. All right. Now, once you're done with that, we're gonna upload it to this. So we're gonna go ahead and hit this arrow button right here. So where you find this, so for example, if you're at the dashboard, you go to settings, and it's right here where it says machine config file. You go ahead and upload it. I'm gonna select that. Hit upload, and then we're gonna hit firmware restart, right? And there we go. We're connected. That was really it. We're now connected. I know everything works in this config. It's my config, so I know everything works. If I hit auto home, it will home right now. And do all the other stuff. So I just wanted to walk you through that. It's pretty easy. It's not hard at all to install. But like promised, I'm going to go over some of the stuff in the config, kind of tell you what they do. But I won't go too much into it, right? I'm just going to give you the base of what everything does. All right. So I'm going to go ahead, open my config. So this is, these are my macros. When you first install Mainsail, if you don't have none of this installed, it might ping you to install these things, and it will it will automatically have a link to where you click on it and then copy these macros and just paste it in. It's pretty easy, self-explanatory. All right, so this is my pause macro. So if I hit pause, these are the places it's gonna go. So on the X, it's gonna go 5mm on the X, the tool head. It's gonna go 310mm on my Y, and it's gonna raise up 10mm on the Z, and it's gonna retract 1mm on the extruder. That's it. That's literally what this is saying, right here. Self-explanatory. This is just at the speed it's gonna do it. So this is like, you know, G1, G91 extruded that, you know, pretty much telling it what to do with these parameters. Okay. This is my resume print macro. Again, extrude 1mm, and then it resume printing. This is my cancel print. So in cancel print, it turns off the heater, clear pause, reset SD card file if you're printing from an SD card, and it uses the base cancel basically. So these here are your stepper. Should have put it. These are your stepper pin, I want to say, on the board. So basically this layout here, if you look at my SKR board, it literally represents what you see on the board. So let me pull up an SKR board just to show you what I'm talking about. Go into this here. I'm gonna go on my server. Go to the server, go to 3D print file. Yeah, let's pull up this. All right, so what you're seeing in a config literally represent what you see on this board. So for example, this is your step pin, this is your direction pin, and this is your enable pin. Okay, this is what you're seeing in the config. Okay, so let's say you wanted to you know, add another X stepper, you know, motor, or another Z. Okay, so you will look at this, and then use the pin that you see here to connect it. So for example, I can turn this extruder here into an X motor as long as I know where the pins are. Okay, that's literally how Klipper works. Okay, so it's based off pins. Basically, your whole configuration is based off the pins off the board. So once you look at the pin layout of the board you're using, you can kind of decipher how Klipper works and what pins need to correspond to what. Pretty easy. For example, if you go back to the no, I don't want that. We don't need that anymore, so I'll close that out. I wanted to go back to here. Okay, so as you can see, it's corresponding with the pin. See, you got your step pin, direction pin, enable pin. They all match up with the board. So let me get that back. I'm working with two screens, so it's a little annoying to go back and forth, but I just kind of wanted to show you guys that. As you can see, if you look at these pins here, they match up with these pins here. So if you look at the X direction pin, see pin 2.2, which is step pin 2.2. Direction pin 2.6, the direction pin 2.6. As you can see, it all matches up. So really, when you look at the kinematics of the board, the layout and the label of the pin, it matches up with the pin configuration in the config file. So basically, the config file is a big old schematic of the board that you're using. That's literally what it is. A big config file with the pin layout of the board you're using. And as long as you understand the two, it's easy now to manipulate the config file, right? So that's what I wanted to show you guys. Until I understand that concept, I didn't know how Klipper worked, because I was confused. I'm like, what are these things? But when you look at the board layout, again, when you look at the board layout and then look at the pins, you realize the config file is just a schematic electrical layout of the board you're using. That's literally it, and that's how it works. So if you're gonna ask me now to explain in depth, I probably couldn't do it, but I just had the gist idea of how it works, and I wanted to present that to you guys so that way you understand exactly what you're doing here, or exactly how they work. So let me see. For example, this is the probe setting. So if you look at the probe pin, it says pin 127. So if we go to the probe pin, this is pin 177, and basically that's your Z stop, which makes sense because with the probe, I'm using the Z end stop to trigger my Z motor to stop, right? So it makes sense. Pin 127, pin 177, right? Let me see. This is my safe homing. That basically anything that's on your left side, so in this config, anything that's on your left is X. Anything that's on your right is Y. Okay, that's how it works in this configuration. This is my bed mesh. Again, if you go into the documents, it goes over what all of this does. The speed of the bed mesh, the horizontal move if you see. So that means when it's doing a bed mesh, it moves 9mm up before it comes back down. In my case, this is the minimum of my mesh. So the minimum of my mesh is 20mm on the X and 40mm on my Y, and the maximum of the mesh is 280mm on my X and 280mm on my Y. So that's what it's telling you. The algorithm is bicubic. There's another one called language, or I don't know if I'm saying it right. Language, it's almost like language. I'm not sure how you say that one, but yeah, there's another algorithm, but it seems like bicubic is the best one to use. This is your fade. So basically, this is the this is how where you want your Z adjustment to fade at. So when you're printing, it's adjusting, right? It's adjusting to your to the mesh of your bed that's created by the probe. And so the 1mm to 5mm, basically it's going to be making all those minor adjustments as it prints, and once you reach 5mm height, it's going to stop making the Z adjustments. The Z is going to behave as normal as in terms of changing each layer, you know. So that's it. Move check distance, move check. So each time the head is moving, every 3mm distance, it's going to check to see where the pro points are, to make sure that it's giving you an even mesh. That's it. So if you go through all of this, guys, if you go through the documents, it tells you exactly what each of these settings does. And that's what I'm saying. The document is there to answer the questions. And once you understand what it means and what it's doing, it gives you a better understanding of how to use the config properly, and you know, some of the questions you don't have to ask on the Facebook group. So this is my bed screws adjust. Essentially, what it just said, it's all of these are points on the bed that my screws are located, and when you activate this the bed screw adjust, it will go around each of my screws until I get it to the right level I want, just like a G code to, you know, level your bed. It's the same thing, but this is built in with Klipper. This is my input shaper config. This is how you're able to run at high acceleration with Klipper. Input shaper is basically a algorithm built into Klipper that basically cancels out any type of motor vibration, basically high peak vibration when you're moving very fast, right? When you're rapidly moving back and forth acceleration, it creates vibration, and the algorithm kind of pinpoints where your peak vibration is and introduces the algorithm to cancel that out. That's the best way to explain it. That's the best way I understand it. So this is input shaper. If you go on Nero 3DP, I think he explains it a little bit better than I do, but again, the documents is also on Klipper website for you to understand it a little bit better. So yeah, so again, this is really simple. If you guys want my config, I can provide it, of course, after I remove the Raspberry Pi MCU out of the config. You guys should be able to connect easy, but like I said, it's pretty easy to do, but I just kind of wanted to go through the initial installation of this. So let me know if there's anything I didn't go over. You know, remember to comment, like, subscribe. But I hope you enjoy this small tutorial. I don't know how long this is going to be, but yeah, so I hope you guys enjoy this, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.